Imagine agreeing to film a prank, thinking the worst that could happen is embarrassing yourself on camera. Instead, you end up filming your own death. From a man trapped upside down beneath the marina dock to another electrocuted on a fake electrical chair. Hey, I'm Nathan, and welcome back to Fatal Files. It was June 21st, 2015, in a warm afternoon at the marina in Beoshich. Tourist boats lined the docks, workers repaired equipment near the boat lift, and people moved between the waterfront shops and fish stalls as the tide sat unusually low. Also at the marina that afternoon were two lifelong friends. Vinko Ante Duran was 27 and Ivo Bilic was 26, and they had known each other since primary school. Vinko worked part-time at the marina and took weekend photography jobs like weddings and boat trips, hoping to make photography his full-time career. Ivo, on the other hand, was always coming up with wild stunts to get attention. He loved pulling practical jokes and getting Vinko to film them. Most of their pranks were harmless, but Ivo always wanted to do something bigger and crazier than last time. Ivo regularly hired Vinko to film his pranks, paying him whenever he could. Vinko wasn't interested in the pranks themselves, but the extra income and filming experience made it worthwhile. A few days before the incident, Ivo told him he had his biggest prank yet and asked him to bring a camera. Like always, Vinko agreed. Ivo wanted to film a fake mafia execution for a prank video. The plan was to stand with his feet inside quick-setting concrete, then crack it open and step out on camera. He had tested it twice at home using a bucket, and it worked. That afternoon, he bought 2 bags of quick-setting concrete from a nearby hardware store and mixed it in a cut-open barrel at low tide. But the marina was much warmer than his garage, and the quick-setting concrete cured faster than he expected. Neither of them realized just how quickly it had hardened. 2 dock workers repairing the nearby boat lift watched him step into the mix barefoot before it had fully set, joking he was out of his mind. Vinko said nothing, crouching at the dock's edge less than 3 feet away to frame the reveal. Ivo twisted his feet, expecting the concrete to crack the way it had during practice, but it didn't. One dock worker watched him rock harder and harder, laughing at first before his expression turned to concern. Vinko kept the camera trained on the concrete, waiting for it to break. Instead, Ivo shifted too much weight backward. With both ankles locked inside the hardened concrete, he couldn't step forward to recover. Witnesses saw his heels slip off the edge of the dock before he fell backward into the marina. Vinko immediately threw the camera aside and grabbed for Ivo's wrist, but the concrete's weight pulled them both over the edge. The 2 dock workers later said both men disappeared beneath the water almost immediately after the splash. One worker jumped into the water, while the other sprinted toward the harbor office to call emergency services. The diver later told police he reached the spot within seconds and immediately saw Ivo below him. The concrete had landed upright on the marina floor, leaving Ivo pinned in a standing position with both feet locked inside it. He tried pulling Ivo free several times, but the block would not move. Additional dock workers quickly brought over sledgehammers and pry bars, chipping away at the hardened concrete until they freed enough of Ivo's legs to pull him safely to the surface. While several dock workers struggled to free Ivo from the hardened concrete, another worker searched for Vinko. He found him trapped beneath the dock after striking a hard surface while diving after his friend. Dazed from the impact, Vinko became entangled when one foot slipped through the tripod strap, wedging it against the dock's underwater bracing. The GoPro continued recording for several seconds, capturing blurred movement, bubbles, and stirred-up silt before the lens became completely obscured. The medical examiner ruled Vinko's death an accidental drowning after he struck his head on a submerged steel support beneath the dock and became entangled in the tripod strap. The examination documented a blunt force head injury consistent with the impact, along with a deep abrasion around his ankle matching the recovered tripod strap. Meanwhile, Ivo was treated for mild water inhalation, cuts, and bruises before doctors removed the remaining concrete from his ankles. Police concluded the incident was an isolated accident caused by a dangerous homemade stunt, and no criminal charges were filed. The recovered GoPro footage was returned to Vinko's family after the investigation. Following his recovery, Ivo deactivated his social media accounts. The marina later installed warning signs banning dangerous stunts on the docks. I wish I could say nobody made that mistake again, but what happened in the next case is proof that people never seem to learn. It was November 9th, 2019. Cape Town was quiet that Saturday afternoon as children rode bicycles down the street and neighbors worked in their yards. The early summer air was warm, carrying the smell of fresh-cut grass, while dogs barked behind nearby fences. 24-year-old Ashwin Deval Naker spent most weekdays working at a hardware store in Woodstock. Although he enjoyed the job and knew a lot about tools and building supplies, there's another thing he's into: creating videos. On weekends, he enjoyed filming harmless prank videos. His audience was small, mostly friends, relatives, and former classmates, but he liked making people laugh. That afternoon, Ashwin had another prank in mind. He wanted to surprise people walking past his house with what looked like an exploding fire extinguisher. A few days earlier, he had picked up an old extinguisher from a scrapyard, emptied it, and packed it with colorful confetti. Using compressed air, the plan was to blast the confetti into the air, making nearby pedestrians think the extinguisher had exploded before revealing it was all just a joke. For me, it sounds like one of those harmless neighborhood pranks that would probably scare people for a few seconds and then give everyone a laugh. The idea sounded simple. Before filming anyone, he wanted to test it one last time in his front yard. Ashwin connected the old extinguisher to a portable air compressor and kept adding pressure. The steel cylinder looked solid from the outside, with nothing that seemed out of the ordinary. He never checked how much pressure it could safely hold because the original gauge had been removed. He set his camera on a tripod a few feet away and pressed record. Then, he picked up the extinguisher and pointed it toward the street. As he squeezed the handle, everything went wrong. Instead of releasing air through the nozzle, the weakened cylinder suddenly failed at the neck, sending the brass valve and handle assembly backward like a bullet. The brass valve assembly struck Ashwin in the neck and upper chest. He collapsed instantly onto the lawn, while the camera continued recording. When his neighbors heard the loud bang and rushed outside, they found Ashwin lying beside the shattered extinguisher and immediately called emergency services. The forensic examination ruled his death an accident caused by blunt force trauma. Investigators determined the fire extinguisher had failed under pressure, turning the brass valve assembly into a high-speed projectile. The injuries severely damaged major blood vessels in his neck and chest, leaving almost no chance of survival. Police found no evidence of foul play and ruled the incident an accidental death caused by a dangerous homemade prank. Investigators concluded years of hidden internal corrosion had weakened the extinguisher until it failed under pressure. The damaged extinguisher, air compressor, and camera were collected as evidence before being returned after the investigation closed. Ashwin's family later removed every video from his prank channel, and the unfinished recording from that afternoon was never made public. Local safety officials used the case in public awareness campaigns, warning people never to refill or modify old pressure cylinders because serious corrosion can weaken the metal from the inside without leaving obvious signs on the outside. If you thought a homemade fire extinguisher was reckless, the next prank proves homemade explosives are an even worse idea. It was April 5th, 2021. An open field outside Białystok in Poland's Podlaski Voivodeship was still damp from recent spring rain. Thin clouds drifted overhead as a few college friends gathered beside a dirt track at the edge of the farmland. Standing near the edge of the field was 23-year-old Bartosz Winczek. He studied at the same agricultural college as several of his friends and enjoyed building homemade gadgets despite having little experience. Looking for a funny video to share with friends, he came up with the idea of staging a fake military ambush using a homemade smoke launcher. Helping him that afternoon was his classmate, 22-year-old Kasper Adrian Zelanka. Kasper was there to film the prank using an old digital single-lens reflex camera he had borrowed from his uncle. Filming local events and videos for friends was simply a hobby, and he had no reason to think this afternoon would be any different. Friends described Kasper as dependable and easygoing, someone who preferred staying behind the camera while others took the spotlight. He had recently started dating a classmate named Zofia, who joined several friends hiding near the tree line as part of the fake ambush. They expected only their close friends would ever see the video. Bartosz Winczek proudly showed his friends the homemade launcher he had assembled from a thick section of polyvinyl chloride pipe collected from a construction site. He packed homemade smoke charges made from sugar and potassium nitrate after following several internet tutorials. One earlier test had produced very little smoke, so he decided to compress the mixture much tighter using a wooden dowel until it barely moved inside the pipe. pipe. The plan sounded harmless to everyone standing there. Bartos would fire the smoke charge toward the tree line, while Kasper filmed directly over his shoulder to make the prank look more realistic. Zofia and two other friends would pretend to scatter through the trees before everyone laughed and watched the footage together. None of them had experience building pyrotechnic devices, and no one questioned whether ordinary plastic pipe could safely contain that amount of pressure. The danger was far greater than they realized. Homemade pyrotechnics had already caused 22 serious injuries across Poland that year, with experts warning that sealing energetic mixtures inside plastic pipe creates unpredictable, explosive pressure. But those warnings never crossed their minds. Everyone was too focused on making the prank look convincing to ask if the launcher was even safe to fire once. Everything changed instantly. Kasper knelt behind and slightly beside Bartos, balancing the camera on his friend's shoulder to keep the launcher centered in frame. Bartos ignited the fuse. Instead of the expected hiss followed by a cloud of smoke, witnesses described hearing one sharp, flat crack that echoed across the field. The launcher never launched anything. It honestly makes me sick to my stomach reading this part. The compressed mixture burned so quickly that expanding gas had nowhere to escape. Pressure built inside the sealed plastic pipe within a fraction of a second until the material shattered violently. Thick white fragments exploded outward like broken glass. Bartos collapsed screaming after shards tore through his leg and forearm, and I still find it hard to comprehend how fast it happened. Kasper, positioned closest to the rear seam, absorbed the worst blast. Jagged pieces punched into his chest and neck, and one fragment cut a major blood vessel. The camera continued recording for 6 seconds before tipping into the grass. Zofia and the others sprinted from the tree line toward both men. One friend immediately called emergency services, while another tried pressing clothing against Kasper's neck to slow the bleeding. Paramedics reached the nearest access road, then hurried across the muddy field carrying medical equipment. It breaks my heart knowing that despite aggressive treatment, Kasper had already lost too much blood. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Fortunately, Bartos survived after emergency surgery. The regional forensic examination found that Kasper died after sharp polyvinyl chloride fragments tore into his neck, severing a major blood vessel and causing rapid blood loss. Investigators concluded the explosion came from the homemade launcher, not intentional harm. Police kept the recovered camera footage as evidence, and it was never released publicly. Bartos was left with permanent injuries that affected his ability to walk, while Zofia later helped her local school introduce lessons on the dangers of homemade pyrotechnic devices. Now let's get to the next one, where a prank involving a driver assist system turned a busy highway into the scene of a fatal mistake. We're only halfway through, and somehow the pranks keep getting worse. If you're enjoying the episode, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel, and we've still got 2 unbelievable cases left. It was February 27, 2017. State Highway 5 outside Rotorua carried a steady stream of weekday traffic beneath a bright, late summer sky. Drivers slowed through scattered roadworks while trucks, couriers, and tourists shared the winding highway. Orange cones stretched along the shoulder, and road crews continued working through the warm afternoon without interruption. Now, get this. 29-year-old Toe Mason Pomare worked weekdays as a courier driver for a small local delivery company. He knew the highways around Rotorua almost by memory and took pride in arriving on time without taking unnecessary risks. Friends described him as dependable, quiet, and usually the one telling everyone to think twice before doing something reckless. Only a few months earlier, Toe had become a father. That changed how often he filmed comedy videos with his cousin Finn Rankin. Their small online channel had only around 1,200 subscribers, most of them family, friends, and people from nearby towns. Toe had largely stepped away from making videos, but Finn had recently installed driver assist technology in his car and wanted one final skit before selling it. Toe agreed because it sounded like a quick afternoon project before heading home. And here's the crazy part. That afternoon, Finn wanted to stage what he called a ghost car prank. The plan was simple on paper. He would activate the lane centering and adaptive cruise features on a quiet highway, climb into the back seat, and let passing drivers believe nobody was steering. To make matters worse, Toe would sit in the front passenger seat, unbuckle his seatbelt, and lean between the front seats so his camera could capture both Finn in the rear and the apparently empty driver's seat in one continuous shot. Their first attempt happened on on a lightly traveled rural road and ended without any problems. Encouraged by that success, I honestly feel like they just got way too confident. They decided the reactions would look much better on State Highway 5, where more vehicles would pass them. They ignored the obvious difference between an empty back road and an active highway containing temporary construction zones, changing traffic patterns, and heavier traffic moving at highway speeds. As they approached a section of roadworks, temporary lane markings directed traffic around concrete barriers. Later, investigators noted that one warning sign was partly hidden behind an overgrown hedge, making the lane shift harder to recognize from a distance. Even so, the construction zone remained clearly marked with cones and barriers. Neither man abandoned the prank before entering it, and then it all went wrong. The dashcam footage, later reviewed by police, showed Tow leaning far forward without his seatbelt, holding the camera toward the windshield. Finn had already climbed into the back seat. The driver assist system continued following the original lane, instead of recognizing the temporary path around the construction barriers. The car stayed on course until the concrete divider filled the windshield. Finn immediately lunged toward the steering wheel, scrambling between the seats as the car closed the remaining distance. He never reached it in time. At roughly 80 kilometers per hour, the vehicle slammed head-on into the concrete barrier. The impact folded the front of the car inward almost instantly. Because Tow had no seatbelt, his body kept moving at full speed. His upper body burst through the windshield, leaving shattered glass scattered across the road, while the rest of him remained trapped inside the crushed passenger compartment. A delivery van traveling behind them stopped within seconds. Its driver called emergency services while another motorist ran toward the wreck carrying a first aid kit. When paramedics arrived, they found Tow had suffered catastrophic injuries and showed no signs of survival. Fire crews used hydraulic rescue tools to free Finn, who remained seriously injured but alive. Police later secured dashcam recordings from both vehicles, allowing investigators to reconstruct every second leading to the crash. The coroner concluded that Tow died from devastating injuries to his head and upper neck caused by being thrown through the windshield during the collision. The examination also found no seatbelt bruising across his chest, confirming he had been completely unrestrained. Investigators noted that the driver assist system carried documented limitations around temporary road markings and construction zones. In the months that followed, Tow's employer introduced mandatory defensive driving refresher training before employees could operate vehicles equipped with driver assist systems. Co-workers quietly referred to it as Tow's briefing. After recovering, Finn publicly accepted responsibility in a newspaper interview, stopped creating online videos, and the footage from that afternoon remained sealed in the police investigation file. You don't always need a speeding car for a prank to turn deadly. Sometimes all it takes is a homemade electrical setup and one small mistake no one saw coming. It was September 18, 2020. Rosario, Argentina, sat under a warm spring afternoon as children played soccer nearby and neighbors walked home along the narrow sidewalk. Inside one aging apartment building, everything seemed perfectly. Living there was 25-year-old Nicolás Farias. Nicolás had recently finished a short graphic design course and had taught himself basic video editing. To practice his skill, he and his older cousin Emiliano Gabriel Roldan, 25, started a small prank channel together. Emiliano came up with the ideas and performed in front of the camera, while Nicholas handled the filming and editing afterward. Their videos rarely attracted more than a few hundred views, mostly from relatives and classmates, but the two enjoyed working on them together more than anything else. That weekend, Emiliano wanted to create what he believed would be their funniest video yet, a fake electric chair execution. The idea sounded ridiculous enough to get everyone's attention. He found an old wooden dining chair at a flea market, wrapped it with thick electrical cables salvaged from discarded appliances, and built a fake control box from scrap plywood with flashing LED lights powered by batteries. Emiliano pretended to strap himself into the chair. At the push of a large homemade switch, hidden speakers would play loud electrical buzzing sounds while Emiliano violently shook around, making it look like he was being electrocuted before jumping up laughing. And Nicolás would film the whole prank. The prank itself probably would have gotten a few laughs. The real problem was the special effect they wanted to add. bad. The smoke machine Emiliano ordered online hadn't arrived yet, so he decided to build something himself. After watching several internet videos, he removed the heating element from an old electric space heater and mounted it beneath the chair. A shallow metal tray suspended above it would slowly drip water onto the hot coils, creating thick clouds of steam that would look like smoke on camera. Everything appeared to be working normally when he plugged the setup in. However, neither of them tested the setup with a circuit tester. Because the apartment kitchen was cramped, Nicholas positioned the camera just behind the chair, placing the lightweight aluminum tripod beside the homemade control box so it could capture both Emiliano and the fake control box in one shot. Emiliano stepped away briefly to adjust one of the speakers while the heating element warmed beneath the chair. Then, Nicholas noticed the camera had tilted slightly. Without thinking, he reached down to straighten the tripod. And that's one of those little mistakes nobody would ever think twice about. I've adjusted a tripod more times than I can count. It's such an automatic habit that no one stops to think about it. The moment his hand touched one of the aluminum legs, witnesses in the neighboring apartment later reported hearing a loud buzzing sound followed immediately by a heavy thud. Electricity had traveled through the damaged extension cord into the metal mounting plate. The tripod, resting against it, had become energized without either cousin realizing it. It's honestly frightening how quickly something like that can happen. Emiliano spun around and saw Nicolas lying motionless beside the chair, both hands still touching the tripod. Instinctively, he rushed forward but felt a sharp shock the instant he reached for the metal leg. Pulling back immediately, he grabbed a dry wooden broom leaning against the kitchen doorway and used it to push the tripod away before dragging Nicolas clear of the setup. A neighbor who heard Emiliano screaming called emergency services, while another apartment resident shut off power to the unit from the building's electrical panel. Nicholas was rushed to the hospital, where doctors pronounced him dead shortly after arrival. The forensic examination ruled Nicholas's death an accidental electrocution. Investigators found the current entered through one hand, traveled across his chest after the energized tripod became part of the electrical circuit, and exited through one foot, sending his heart into a fatal rhythm within seconds. Aside from small electrical burns on one hand and one foot, he had few visible injuries. But what the inspectors found after the accident was almost unbelievable. A single screw had pierced the extension cord beneath the homemade control box, while the apartment's aging breaker failed to cut the power in time. And that single screw caused the fatal accident. Police recovered both camera recordings as evidence, though neither was released publicly. Investigators found no evidence of intentional harm and no criminal charges were filed. Emiliano later deleted their channel and never filmed another prank.